Tangled Hearts. Chapter 2. Unspoken Words. Lara's heart thudded in her chest as she stared at David, his presence so unexpected, and yet so familiar. It had been years since she had seen him, years since their love had turned to ashes, and yet standing in front of him now felt as though the years had melted away. His eyes, those deep brown eyes that once held so many promises, now seemed unreadable. But there was something in them, something that made her want to step back into the past and pretend nothing had ever changed. She couldn't. Lara forced herself to look away, her gaze settling on the coffee cup in front of her. Her hands were trembling slightly, though she hoped no one could see it. The words, the questions, the anger and the hurt that had been buried deep inside her all these years suddenly resurfaced, raw and unrelenting. Jack cleared his throat, drawing both of their attention. "I think we should all sit down. It's been a while, right?" he said with a forced cheerfulness, his eyes flicking between them. David nodded but didn't sit. "I can't stay long," he said, his voice distant, almost guarded. "I just wanted to..." "Check in?" Lara interrupted before she could stop herself. She hadn't meant to sound bitter, but the words slipped out, coated with more resentment than she had anticipated. She quickly regretted it, her eyes flashing up to meet David's. He didn't flinch. "I didn't mean it like that," he replied, his tone quieter now, more cautious. I didn't expect to see you here, Lara. Not like this." Lara stared at him, the weight of his words settling in her chest. She didn't know what she had expected, but it certainly wasn't this awkward dance of half-formed apologies and unexplained silence. This was not the reunion she had imagined in her mind. There was no warmth, no comfort in his presence, only a coldness that stretched between them, a gulf that neither of them seemed to know how to bridge. Jack stood up, sensing the rising tension. "All right, how about we take a step back?" he said with a half laugh. "Lara, you just got here, and David, you've got places to be. Maybe we should all just breathe for a second." Lara nodded quickly, grateful for the interruption. She couldn't breathe when he was so close, when she was acutely aware of the space between them, the things left unsaid. David hesitated, but finally took a seat at the table, his body language still distant. He stared at the table for a moment before speaking again, his voice softer this time. "I didn't want to hurt you, Lara. You know that, right?" Her stomach twisted at the words, though she knew he was being sincere. But sincerity didn't erase the years of pain he had caused her. It didn't erase the heartbreak, the betrayal. She wanted to tell him that, to say all the things she had kept bottled up inside, but the words caught in her throat. "I'm not sure I can believe that anymore," she said finally, her voice low but steady. David flinched, though he didn't speak. His eyes darkened, and Lara couldn't tell if it was regret or something else. She couldn't tell if he was sorry enough to make amends for the hurt he had left behind. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said quietly after a long pause. I need you to know that I never wanted things to end the way they did." Lara wanted to scream, wanted to throw all of her anger at him. It was unfair, so incredibly unfair, that after all this time, he still didn't understand the depth of what he had done to her. But instead of yelling, she simply stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. She couldn't sit there anymore. Not with him in front of her. Not with all the emotions swirling inside her. Jack stood up as well, sensing that the conversation was reaching its breaking point. "Maybe it's better if we all just take some space for now," he said, offering Lara a sympathetic look. "We'll catch up later, all right?" Lara nodded, though her eyes never left David's. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Later." David stood up as well, his expression unreadable. "I'll leave you two to it," he said, his voice neutral. "Take care, Lara." Lara nodded stiffly, her hands clenching at her sides. She didn't say anything else as David walked away, the door to the cafe swinging closed behind him. She could still feel the weight of his gaze on her, even though he was no longer there. Jack watched her closely, his face full of concern. "You okay?" he asked softly, his voice gentle. Lara didn't answer right away. She was anything but okay. Her emotions were a chaotic mess. Hurt, anger, confusion, all tangled together. She had never expected to see David again, not like this. But now that he was back in her life, everything felt uncertain, like the ground beneath her feet had shifted. "I don't know," she finally whispered. "I don't know if I'll ever be okay." Jack nodded, not pushing her further. "You don't have to figure it all out now, but you will eventually. You've always been stronger than you think, Lara." Lara gave him a small, half-hearted smile. Jack had always been there for her, even when she had pushed him away, even when she had shut herself off from the world. He was the one constant in her life, the one person who had never left her side. "I just didn't expect to see him again," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not like that. Not after everything." Jack sighed, pulling out the chair and sitting back down. "I get it. But you don't have to do this alone, okay? I'm here. We'll figure this out, whatever this is." Lara looked at him, the sincerity in his eyes washing over her like a wave. He was right. She didn't have to face this alone, even if she felt like she was. She had Jack. She always had. But David's return, it changed everything.